Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hops Geek News, your home for comic books, movies, TV shows, and of course, we feature a beer of the week. Typically, today we have a great guest, as our guest today has ties to actually both locations that Lauren and I are, from and are the stomping grounds. So this is gonna be a great episode as we talk to Travis Gibb about his comic book, Granite State Punk. And man, for a lot of you guys up in New Hampshire, Granite State. We'll dive into that, man. Wicked pumped to be talking this comic book. It's excellent. A lot of really good references that pull on the heartstrings, if you will. So with that said, Hops Geek News, you already know the spiel. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Social media, that's where podcasting platforms, all the same name. And then if you can go ahead and just spread the word, man. And this is a creator episode, so we don't have any news or notes. We're going to dive into it in just a second. My beer felt thematic, and it's actually from Lauren down in Orlando, Florida, from Sideward Brewing. I picked up Full Fuzz today because I felt like it fit the theme. We're going to be talking about witches, and they got a little bit of the cool thing. And one thing I really like about Sideward, this is a IPA, of course, is their IPAs are just as good as their stouts. Really love the brewery. They do a lot of really good stuff there. So Lauren, that said, what you got over there?
So actually my Full Fuzz, I'm out of Full Fuzz, but I do have a Sideward beer as well. Again, yes, I got their logo on the glass too. Their logo is very fitting for this, but I'm actually drinking their double IPA called Witch Hammer. So anybody watching on the YouTube, I don't know why I'm so orange today. I don't know what's with the light, but the can's orange as well. And it almost looks like she's holding book from Hocus Pocus, but it's a little bit creepy.
Listen here, Lauren, the Supreme Court's not going to give you rights back, okay? Just because you're orange.
Oh, Jesus.
All jokes aside,
that's
man.
What I'm drinking. Of course, it's fantastic because it's Sideward, and like Matt said, they don't do a bad beer. Their beer is fantastic.
Absolutely love what Sideward's doing, and of course, we do have our guest. So let's dive into it. Travis Gibb is joining us. What is up, man?
My beers suck right now in the fridge, but I brought an Angry Orchard to play.
Hey,
but maybe you'd have a PBR.
No, I do like PBR, but I'm a stout guy, so I like expensive beer that's a meal. So that's my thing. I'm also drinking a Liquid Death, so it's kind of like two beers. Like it looks like a beer, but it's not.
That's true. I always get messed up when I see Liquid Death. I'm like, oh, what are they drinking? And then I see Liquid Death. I'm like, clever. It's clever marketing, really. Honestly,
good water.
I love buying it with my nephew. We go into like a 7-Eleven or a Cumberland Farms, and they're just like, hey, you can't buy a beer with a kid around. I was like, this is not beer, good sir.
Good news is it's actually the nectar of the gods known as water, funny enough.
Well, and they do like lightly flavored water and stuff, and it's really good water.
It is. Well, I didn't know water out of a can would be so exciting to me, but I like water.
I do love, because this comic book, we'll talk about like the music influences, but one of the things I love is as I have gone through the music scene, I know the comic Granite State Punk has a lot to do with like the punk scene, and I grew up in like the Warped Tour scene. And so going from monster cans filled with water to now like a lot of the shows are the Liquid Death. It's just funny to see that progression throughout the music scene. And Lauren's reference to PBR, which is another staple in the punk scene. But let's dive into it.
That was referenced in the comic. So anybody who hasn't read the comic yet, there was a nod to PBR, which is why I didn't just randomly bring it up. Like, you look like a guy that likes PBR.
No. Everybody who's in the punk scene, if they don't drink PBR on some level, is lying, or they're not really punk, they're a poser.
100%.
My brother's go-to beer is PBR.
See, he's real, but
nobody likes it.
I mean,
that's all we could afford.
A cheap beer, yeah.
It makes
you spend like $20 on a show, like Zach Brown Band, really?
Yeah, because he says PBR in the song "Toes in the Water, Ass in the Sand," and then he goes to the lake and he's like, "A PBR in my hand. Life is good today."
You know I don't speak Spanish.
But that's always where mine goes. But I remember drinking, like, if there was a bar here in Orlando that you could buy like 6 PBRs at a time, and they would just give it to you in like the case, like they would hand you half the case.
Oh, nice.
And we were just drinking out of there all night.
Well, I mean, like growing up in the music scene, that's what you get at the bar. You go to the Worcester Palladium, or again, another with the Casino Ballroom in Hampton is another one, and you get the cheap beer, and you can mosh and do all sorts of stuff. But let's dive into it. Travis, one thing we like to ask, I love to know, what is your comic origin story? Because you actually got a good one. You also have some ties to the comic book shop I used to frequent a lot. So how did you first get onto the comic book scene?
So the comic book scene for me, I've always been into it, and it's probably because of where I was born. I'm from Rochester, New Hampshire, so I'm from where the comic is from. But that's right next to Dover, New Hampshire, which is where the Ninja Turtles. Yes. So the Ninja Turtles are from Dover, and at my particular age, which I'm not going to reveal here, Ninja Turtles were a big thing. And like Eastman and Lord were around. They did small little things, and I've met them, you know, growing up. So for me, like indie comics and creating comics it went hand in hand, you know. And as I grew a little bit older in the 90s, Image blew up, right? And then we had the Tick. So like New England and New Hampshire, like that area of that is like indie comics is like what you need to do. You just literally make it and you're a millionaire. It's no problem. It's just super easy.
That's how it happens. Honest to
Right.
God, it's true. Funny enough, I do believe you're buying really nice waterfront houses down there on the coast.
Right. That's all you got to do. So that's really what led me into it. You know, I was a huge fan, huge 90s kid. I love the X-Men. You know, my grandmother signed me up to, back in the day, I don't know if you guys had it in school, but they gave you like came home and you picked magazines and you could order the magazines. Your school would get some money.
Oh
back.
yeah. Yep. 100.
She ordered Spider-Man, you know, so I got Spider-Man, and I got it, you know, from the time I was 12 to now. I have never missed an issue of Spider-Man or X-Men.
Wow.
So I have every single issue that's come out since then of that, except for stupid annuals, because annuals are dumb sometimes, Marvel.
I will agree with that. Annuals kind of like they almost sometimes like ruin I don't want to say if ruin's the right word, but there's like a flow to the comics, and then the annual will come out, and then you're like kind of get thrown off a little bit.
For new audiences, I feel like that's their grab to, you know, just try to get new people in.
For
Because
sure.
it can be as somebody who didn't get into comics until I was an adult, it can be very overwhelming the first time you step foot in a comic store. And it's like, I don't even know what just happened. That's why it was easy to start with The Walking Dead was one of my first ones, because I knew, like, you know, but even then I was reading them in volumes, and then I needed the issues, and I was like, I don't know where to go. But yeah.
Well,
I don't know how to get people into comics anymore. Like, you know, where to start people. Like, this run is really good, but you could start at this issue 1, or we just got to wait till the reboot. Should be a couple months, you know.
Mhm.
We'll get you in. And I don't even think that's necessarily bad, but it is very confusing for someone who decides to get all in, right?
Yeah.
Like if you need to organize your comic collection, you know, and there was a time in between where they didn't even have legacy numbers. Now at least they have the like legacy number, so you know what number it is. But there was a time where that didn't even exist. You had to just guess.
Mhm.
It is very daunting too, especially as, you know, the rise of things like the MCU, DC universe, or all the other comic. Everyone's like, oh, I kind of want to read this. This is source material. And then they go in, it's like, okay, but where do I start? I realize that there's 60 plus different places of X-Men. Like, where does it start? Where does it end? But Marvel never really ends a storyline. They just kind of like converge. DC will do it to maybe their detriment, but I actually like that DC will have a definitive end before rebooting something. And it can be very daunting.
Yeah.
You're right.
But even, you know, with like, look at the Uncanny X-Men. Like, Chris Claremont is literally now on, like, he just finished Madripoor Nights, and now he's doing this Wolverine deep cut that is a spin-off from like issue 227 of X-Men 9 in the 80s. And so it's like, yeah, those universes never die. But I will say to anybody who is overwhelmed, just pick up any comic book and kick it off. They will catch you up at the beginning and whatnot. And another great way to get into comics, I would say, are these independent creators like one we have with us, because comics aren't just superheroes. There are all sorts of different things all over the place. You know, we have a whole creator corner if you ever just want to dip your toes into one. Like, yeah, come to Hops Geek News and find some. So, Travis, obviously you have been into a lot of this. You said Spider-Man kind of made you fall in love with all this, and X-Men. So is that your origin story, was getting those books as a young kid that made you want to get into writing comics?
Yeah, I see. Unlike most people, I don't have. I have always been reading comics and always part of them because of the Ninja Turtles fame. Like seeing the Ninja Turtles is growing up, and then the Spider-Man. I know Spider-Man is what hooked me, but I was even living next to a kid. I don't know what his parents did, but he would randomly give me, he wanted to be my friend. I didn't want to be his friend, but he wanted to be my friend. And he would give me comics. He would give me a lot of horror comics like Fright Night and like Chucky, like adaptions, like next door at like 9 years old. And I would read them. So comics have always been a big part of my life. My goal from day one was to write comics. I didn't know how, but I was a huge film buff in high school. So I was like, oh, I'm going to get into Kevin Smith, like Kevin Smith. So he's writing Daredevil. All he did was make a movie, and it was independent. Didn't even have to be that good. You know, just go ahead. And not that I don't think Clerks, Mallrats, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan, but I was like, just make a movie. It's way easier. I know how to make a movie. So that's what brought me to Florida. Actually, I flew down to go to film school and decided I was going to make a film. And then I was going to pitch once I get one or two to Marvel and DC so I could write comics. That was not what happened. But luckily, in like 2002 to 2004, I did write a few little independent comics. So I went to MegaCon, met a lot of people, and got to write some stuff. And then sometimes what happens, and maybe you guys have heard of this, you go through your life and you're in college and you're like, hey, I'm going to have this thing called premarital sex. I'm just going to try it out. See if I like
I've never heard of that. Don't ask
What
me
do you mean?
how long I've been married.
No, I understand. I understand. Not everybody's heard about it. It's a new wave thing. It's a new wave. A lot of the kids are doing it these days.
For all those sinners out there.
And I had a child, so I have a 22-year-old. Crazy.
I have a 20-year-old.
Yeah, but I decided to be a dad. I chose to be a dad instead of do comics. But as my daughter was going off to college and starting stuff, I have a wonderful wife. It's different from the person who had that one night stand premarital sex. And my wife knew that I made comics. So I had a book. It's called Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies. I had it in a folder. And she was like, you have a complete book and you've never published it? I was like, oh, yeah, I've got like 2 issues. It's fine. I just never got around to publish it. She's like, that's really stupid. And I really had no answer besides.
You're like, you know what else is stupid? Premarital sex.
Right. I mean, because I'm not a casual comic fan. Like, I sometimes hate creators because they don't read comics. I read a massive amount of comics. My pull list is massive. I read almost everything. Yeah. So like I'm a hardcore comics fan. So my wife was just shocked. So we went and finished that graphic novel and I got the bug. And now I'm doing a Kickstarter month with various titles and all sorts of stuff and several publishing deals.
Was she your editor?
She is my editor. Yeah, she's my editor. Yeah, I use her as my editor. And for many different reasons, not just because she's my wife, but she also has experience with that. Growing up, she worked for, again, this is for old people, Sylvia Brown, who did Unsolved Mysteries. She was like,
I know exactly who Sylvia Brown is. My wife loves Sylvia Brown.
So she did some of that stuff and helped there. So she's very educated in that. And you guys both read Granite State Punk, or at least you're pretending to, which either way, I'm very happy about. When you're speaking so intimately, like Granite State Punk is a very intimate book. I need someone who really knows my voice. Like, because it's very much my like inner head, like on a page.
That's so unique. Like, it's a very unique, because sometimes people are like, oh, I just picked up X-Men and I didn't really know that I wanted to write, but no, like you right from the get-go, man. It's like you were born and right as soon as you came out, boom, there's a comic book in your hand. And it's really cool to get to see that side of the things and how much of a fan you are, and seeing somebody who has such a deep admiration, and then is also even more excellent when like your wife or significant other, whoever, is like, no, dude, you like pushes you more often than not and is there every step of the way. It's very unique, and I always love those kind of stories because it makes things more personal.
Yeah.
Yes, and this story, I feel like, so Zeke, our main character, he is very vulnerable, but he's also, I feel he's talking to us. So how did you consciously make that decision to have the main character like talking to the audience and taking it, because he's our narrator and our main character? So was that a conscious decision, or did the story just kind of naturally evolve like that?
No, it was a conscious decision. So there's a movie called SLC Punk, which is independent. And Matthew Lillard kind of breaks the fourth wall sometimes and talks to you a little bit, and it's very punk rock. So I wanted to emulate that, as well as really get you inside this character's head and kind of show you different versions. And it gets deeper as the issues go. Like in the latest issue 4, like we literally have a young Zeke who is a version of him who is still an anarchist, who wants him to do kind of like your younger self. And then we have another version of the younger self, which is the one he tells everybody. And then we've got the emo. Like I go very deep in that because I really want it to be about mental health and about recovery. I use alcohol, even though I drink, I use straight edge in trying to recover of that as part of the story, as part of the narrative, to allow that. Granite State Punk is super personal. What happened is I now have a son who's 5 years old. And he was born so I come from a family of drug and alcohol abuse, very, very bad situation. They were both of my parents died. My dad overdosed. My mom died, even though she was in recovery for a long time. She literally died because she had an ulcer in her that burst, and she had taken Percocets for the first time because she had back surgery, and she didn't know the difference of the feeling of a Percocet or the stuff, and so she died because it was oozing into her for a couple of days. So like it was very personal, and I hated New Hampshire. It was done, right? Nothing good can happen to it. But when you have a son, you're like, you got to show him where you come from. So I needed to learn how to love the state again. So I started writing this book to try to express what I hate about the state, because I express a lot of what I hate about the state, but I also through it have learned to love all the idiocies of New Hampshire, because New Hampshire is such a complicated to live free or die doesn't really fit the state. They don't want people to fucking live there. Like really,
They hate everybody. Oh my God.
Right. If you're not from there, fuck you.
Exactly. The second they see like a Massachusetts plate or somebody, they're like, oh, those Massachusetts people are back. Get out of here. We don't want you. And then they're over here in our, Franconia, like the loop up here, messing up our trail.
Right.
You're right. 100% right. And you talk about how like learning, I think that's really interesting to me because I've lived in the same town, Rochester, this is about that you grew up in. So I've seen a very different side of Rochester than you. I didn't grow up there. I wasn't born there, but I did live there, and seeing where it has grown from, and as you have gone back and you've gotten to see it grow. And so as soon as second I opened this, I was like, oh, Rochester. And then you started pointing out places like Lafayette, the fairgrounds, man. I've gone to the school bus derbies at the fairgrounds. At Dunkin' Donuts, if I'm not mistaken, is the one right up the road from Jetpack Comics. It looks like that's exactly. I know that interior anywhere. And to me, it was very endearing because I was like, I know this place. Frisbee Memorial, which is mentioned in this book. My daughter was born there. And
Frisbee is in issue 3. It's in issue 3. And you mentioned the Hampton Casino. That's where issue 2 takes place.
Yeah. Hampton Casino. I've gone to concerts there. Obviously, like you mentioned it there. It's like, oh, it's very nice and rich. I always thought it was like the Jersey Shore of New Hampshire because it's like dirty now. But it was just funny seeing that like you had such a different take versus me who's been away from home for a while. I'm like, oh man, I love this. Is all the things I know I love. And then you were like, man, I had to relearn to love it, which is very interesting. And that was going to be one of my questions is there's so much there. So like it was cathartic for you. Did this help you then learn to relove it?
Yeah, absolutely. I go back often, Jetpack's had me out a couple of times, and Granite State Con, you write a book called Granite State Punk. It sells better there, weirdly enough. So yeah, I've really learned to love it, and it's allowed me to spend more time with my family, which is good because I got 2 brothers, so I get to visit them more often, which is really nice. And it really speaks to like some trauma. I have some trauma, and it allows me to get it out, but also do what I love and bless the state. Writing an alternate history to the Man in the Mountain is such a good thing for me. Like that's powerful to me because I love the old Man in the Mountain. I was so
everybody remembers when it fell off the earth. Yeah, everybody remembers that day that it just collapsed. Yeah, like Lauren, the old Man in the Mountain is a real thing.
Okay, I was like, I remember reading about it in the comic.
It's up in the White Mountains, and if you had faced it a certain way, it literally looked like the face. That's why on the license plate, everyone is all about in like 2002. It fell, it collapsed, the whole thing collapsed. But it's like,
and now we know why.
It's a New Hampshire lore. But what you did with it was a spin, because this is a story about witches. Like the power of them comes from this old Man in the Mountain, which I thought was just wicked clever.
So I also love that you point out how Salem has become a tourist trap and like people were literally murdered there. So I'm curious because I went to Salem for the first time a little less than a year ago, and I was actually impressed with how tastefully done the tour that I did was, because it ended with a memorial to the witches, and they talked about how these witches I should say, these were just women, and there was a dude too that were
witches
murdered. I mean, these people were murdered, and they had to like bring in the militia to stop these murders.
Allegedly, I understand.
Even though it actually happened in Danvers, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I was going to ask what your actual like. Do you enjoy going to Salem, or is that another place that you're like, ugh?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does as a kid. As a kid, we had witches that were burned here. Let's go. So yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy writing about the supernatural, and really connecting with this particular series. So yeah, connecting with Salem and Mass. You cannot, if you live in Massachusetts is the center of New England, regardless of what we admit. Like all of our sports teams are there, so we have to even though you hate those people, you have to also love those people, right? If you want to be cool, you have to talk about, you don't go, I spent a really cool night in Concord. You go, I spent a good night in Boston, right?
Yeah. You don't go to Manchester for a good time most of the time.
Right. You can't, so those connections are really intimate to me. So when I started doing this, I really wanted to write a lot of New Hampshire history as we go. We do the first witch trial in New Hampshire. That's what issue 2 is about for Breaking Edge. In issue 3, we address in Dover, there was a big mill fire that was a huge thing where they rebuilt. We address that. And then in the issue that's coming out, we deal with the Mayflower and Pilgrims. Because if you're in New England, this is your lifestyle. Like you are taught, it's just as important as the president, like understanding how our president works, like the Mayflower, like that's our shit. We own it. Like we know these are really important. So the Pilgrims coming and all that stuff, all that history, we're really proud of it. Even though we did tons of stuff during the Revolutionary War that we should talk about, but we're like, fuck that. We got to talk about
Listen, I
witches
always
and-
tell everybody Massachusetts invented America. That's like always my thing.
That
And
is
then
one
like
of his quotes.
New England invented comic books. Like we're just seeing, the Ninja Turtles and things.
It's just it's always interesting to hear what locals think about a tourist trap. Especially like I lived my whole life in Florida, so obviously I have different opinions about certain areas in Florida. So that's why I was just curious your own personal views. So, but yeah, going into the supernatural. Oh, I already asked that question. Yeah. So, are you a fan of Supernatural?
Oh my god.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a geek. I was a LARPer, so I did a lot of Vampire the Masquerade LARPs, and like I ran, not to brag how geeky I am, I ran about 300 players in Central Florida, in Orlando, in stuff for Vampire. So all that stuff has always been intriguing to me, like vampires, and like my favorite show growing up was Highlander. I loved Highlander, like that was my shit. So,
oh yeah, there can only be one.
Yeah, so so most of my books have a supernatural tint to them, even if I don't mean to. They just happen to. That's why I do all the Cthulhu and stuff, and I have a book called Voodoo Nations. So I love exploring that. Particularly though with this particular book, I love like in this, which that stuff is kind of like an algorithm for the alcoholism, right? Instead of just showing people get drunk, it's like these people who are powerful or doing something are kind of the allegory of like what he doesn't understand. He doesn't fit into what they're trying to do. It's no different than my dad dealing drugs. It's just far more exciting to talk about witches,
Right. Well, I mean, you even had alcohol to a point of numbing a certain thing that I don't want to spoil it and say what that thing was, but I thought it was very interesting to bring that in and make it relevant. It was also funny, the AA meeting, the little spin you did on that too. That actually made me giggle. And again, I don't want to ruin it. So there are a couple of points, like there was comedy in here too, because you know what, I feel like comedy we use to deal with things. Now, so going in, obviously this comic is dark. We're talking witches, we're talking supernatural. The art. So I want to talk about the art for a few minutes. This art was amazing. It's very detailed, but you can see like, the shadowing, and you can see the pencil marks. And so how did that go back and forth with your artist, and how did what you envisioned come onto the paper, and how much back and forth was that?
Yeah. So, and Matt can back me up this. He has never been to New Hampshire at all, but he knows New Hampshire. Like he can draw, he knows exactly how to draw them from pictures. There's an issue in issue 3, Matt, where we go to Spalding High School, and he literally knows the position between the door and the stairs. And I didn't tell him that. You can't tell that from a picture. He just knows.
That's one thing I actually wanted to bring up too, like to caveat off of Lauren, is that's interesting that he doesn't know, because to me, just looking at the art, I'm like,
I mean, you knew the Dunkin' Donuts,
but that's what I'm saying. That's a testament to the art. Like I knew that dunk as soon as they were inside, because there's a scene where he's like, everybody in this town knows you, and it's Dunkin' Donuts. I'm like, I know that, like this. I went there every morning on my way to work, because Cumbies is like across the street, and then Jetpack's right down the main road, and then like Spalding High School, Lafayette, and then even the outside of Frisbee, and just all the little like houses, even the houses on like the main road right there, they have that very old like witchy vibe to them. I was like, wow, like I felt it immersed us. And I think between that and just like you discussing and almost like through the words bringing it to life. So did he go off pick? Like, was there any like point where he was like, hey, this is what I have, and you're just like, nope, this is perfect? Or you're like, you just didn't coach him like at all as to what these places look like?
No, I mean, I sent him pictures. Obviously I sent him pictures, but like not everything. Like I didn't send him pictures of the Dunkin' Donuts. I didn't tell him the positioning of stairs. Patrick, to just so I don't forget, this is the first comic book. My grandmother passed away, and my grandma was really good to me, and she gave me a decent chunk of money. So this was the first book in my whole catalog where I actually, this is the artist I want. Like, this is the artist that fits. I was like, this grungy style, I know it's not for everyone. I know like there's going to be people turned off from the art style, but I think the people who are in the punk rock scene, who is my target audience for this book, are going to dig this. And then I think if you get any people who are supernatural, they like dark, gritty, like stuff. So this was stuff. It's you guys know Alex Cormack,
Mhm.
Judge John Lee's Sync stuff?
Yep.
He's kind of like, I wanted like an Alex Cormack type style. And I think that
See it. Yeah.
Patrick is a very like similar style, but I didn't want Alex Cormack because I also wanted to kind of discover someone. I wanted like, because I think for me personally, Alex Cormack's always going to be Sync, like that book and are going to be forever entwined. So getting him and doing that, but Patrick, believe it or not, almost perfect every time. Like I have very little notes. And when I do have notes, 50% of the time, he convinces me that he's right. Because so like he's like, oh, here's why I did it that way, and blah, 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 blah. Wow. So no, I actively chose all those things. I chose his coloring palette and all those things specifically for that particular style and the way he does things, because I think he screams punk rock.
Well, yeah, some of the colors were so beautiful too that he used for like some of the witchcraft that was ongoing. I thought it was, I love the purple in it. And go ahead, man.
I think this, well, like the punk rock. No, I did not mean to cut you off, Lauren, but like the punk rock in the supernatural, there's like it's perfect, but it's also like there's a scratchy kind of like rough vibe to it, which I think also works. And when we're talking about like the punk rock scene, like I kind of grew up in it. Lauren is over here quoting country music, so we know she didn't grow up in it.
I just saw Blink for like the 9th time. I'm
all right, but you didn't see. Anyways, so is the punk rock scene, is that something you grew up in as well, and you wanted to really incorporate into this?
So yes and no. So because of, I shared earlier that my parents are a very drug and alcohol family. So I traveled. So Rochester has 11 schools. They have 11 different schools. I went to 9 of them, just so you know, growing up, because we moved so often every year. Which really helped me when I got to middle school. Like it was really shitty, like growing up, but when you get to middle school where they all combine into one, like I knew everybody, so I was extremely popular. So I was really hard to commit to any group. The only group I really committed to was more of the grunge scene. But I think there's a lot of parallels between the grunge scene and the punk scene.
I think they complement each other very well, without a doubt.
Yeah. But I don't want to run. You can't write a book about a old grunge head, Yeah.
No, you're right. You're 100% right.
So yeah, I was in the punk scene, but I've always been kind of a punk, a punk scene adjacent. So I would go to the concerts. Didn't always do the garb per se, but I went to the concerts and stuff. But some of my favorite people in the world are punk. I love sitting for hours talking to a punk rock, just like we would talk about comic.
Yeah.
They'll just tell you everything going on in their world and how to solve all the fucking world's problems, but they don't want to do anything about it. And it's fascinating to me, and I love it. I just love it.
It's funny you do, because even the Hampton Ballroom, I've gone to shows there, and it's just like because back in the day, you used to kind of like show up to shows early. You'd have your $25 ticket, you'd be there early because everybody wants to get into the pits. But you're right, like some of the conversations I've had, it's everybody's got these ideas, and like, wow, you're a really fascinating person who the roughness, like going into the art, there's the roughness around the edge, but once you started to get to know them, you're like, oh wow, you have great ideas. But you're right, everyone's like, man, that's somebody else's problem, or I'm not going to do this for the man, or like, it is too funny. And it's almost kind of like Zeke too, because he's very punk and straight edge, but he almost seems to be running away from all that at the same time.
Yeah, it's very intentional. The reason why he doesn't wear a band shirt, the reason why I put a lack of tattoos, it's not because he's a poser. It's because if you follow punk music and punk people, there's a point where they get rid of all that stuff, because that's also selling out, because they realize that like now we have a uniform, so we
parodies of themselves.
And I love it, and it makes me happy. So I made sure in this book, like he has that. That's why he has the faux. Like you could tell he had a mohawk at one point, but it's grown out, so that's why his hair is kind of the way it is. It's all intentionally on purpose. And I absolutely love it. And then talk about especially as adults going to punk shows. Punk shows have the most kids of any concerts I go to.
Yeah.
And the kids are protected in the back. There's this weird thing about punks where they are hardcore, will punch you in the face, but also stay away from kids. Trans people are welcome. Like
they're one of the most welcoming groups you'll ever see, and also the most caring. It's like, yes, we should punch each other in the face in the pit, because that's the etiquette. But then if somebody falls down, hey, we pick you up. Or you're right, the kids in the back with the hey, you don't touch. It is very such an interesting vibe, and I think you translate that very well to Zeke, because he's like, I don't know why I'm telling you this. Nobody pays attention to AA, or like he's very much like, I don't want to have to save the day from Hampshire's first ever witch that I brought back to life to ask questions, because it's my long lost ancestor and that's now set forth on the town, but I'm gonna do it. And also into that now, kind of talking about the powers, like how does the alcohol and knocking himself out, like how did you come up with that idea of like powers? That's how they connect. Like his powers seem to work by knocking himself out, so to speak.
Yeah. So, well, it's actually the opposite. His power is like knocking himself out, shuts off the power. He doesn't have control.
That's what it was. You're right.
Yeah, he doesn't have control.
Yeah, it's his off switch.
So, the parallel, a lot of people make the parallel between him and John Constantine. I see that, especially if you do the 80s and the punk rock, issues, the Grant Morrison run, they did a lot of that stuff. But the difference between Zeke and Constantine is Zeke, I promise you can read this issue, and I don't plan on ever stopping writing this book. You can read from now to end. He will never be good at magic because he doesn't care enough. Like where Constantine is good at magic. Mm-hmm. So that this is just raw power that's in him. He may be able to do a thing or two, but he's never going to try to con you. He's never going to try to do any of that because it's just natural to him, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. Like he doesn't want these responsibilities that were thrown on him, to deal with. So that was one of the things that I had. I wanted him to be powerful. I wanted him to be able to do a lot of these things, but I also wanted it to be something that he can't control. He needs other people. He needs, the things he hates, other people. Right. He hates this addiction. He needs it. All the things that he hates, he has to do to be able to control the thing that he has inside of him.
Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the art too, because like the art's beautiful and perfect in its own way, but it's very messy. And I feel like because like Zeke is the narrator and it's all about him and his struggle with so many different things, I feel like the art just meshes so well in that regard of, just like you can see the lines, you can see the auras, like you can see all of that because he's being so vulnerable, but he doesn't have any of it figured out. So I think that's a really cool way to do it.
I agree. Now, how many issues are you planning to do within Granite State Punk universe?
Forever.
I was going to say you said forever.
I just wanted to make sure. I know you said forever, but sometimes they're like, I say forever, but I actually mean like 5.
So the one shot is a cop out. So the one shot was to help me get published with Scout. They didn't like full series when they weren't done, but I wanted to get it sooner. You are not in New England now, but a couple of years ago, there was maybe you guys know, do you guys know about Black Caravan?
I've heard it. Yes.
Yeah. So Scout had an imprint called Black Caravan. It was very like the cool kids, and it sold really well, like selling very good at like hotcakes book, and it was signed on for that. So we did series of one shot. I was originally signed on for that. I did, and my plan was to just do a one shot. That first book, that's why it has such a definitive editing. Mm-hmm. But then I loved it so much, and the artist, we made a deal because I can't afford. He's very expensive, so I can't always afford him. But he also loves the book. That makes it a lot easier when you do these collaborations, and he loves the book. He's willing to, be paid on the back end or paid in like chunks. Right. So I don't have to shell it all out to be able to do it. And he's very fast. So we're going to do 5 to the trade. So we're going to do 5 issue arcs. Okay. So it's kind of in season. So the next one, 4 just finished on Kickstarter. That was called Only Posers Fall in Love. Number 5 is going to be called The Pilgrim. And we're going to do some Thanksgiving stuff and Mayflower stuff, just like we talked about. It's very popular. And then we'll get our trade, and then we'll go into kind of season 2 of what that looks like. So I'll kind of do like 5 issue arcs and then a trade.
Awesome.
So saying that you're going to do it forever, do you have a lot of ideas of where all you want Zeke to go?
Yeah. I have at least 10 out. I don't. So I'm one of those. I know some people. I hate another thing that I hate about indie writers are just, I have mapped out till issue 12. Cool. So you don't want to listen to any fan feedback. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
So I don't do that, but I do have, here's the topics that I want to do in issue, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have them all mapped out. We're going to do some, I want to, what's cool about Granite State Punk is it really allows me to go in any direction. I can do, this latest issue had no supernatural, has just, Nazis.
Yeah.
I have an issue coming up that we're going to literally use panels from all the old issues and make a new story from it, using it as a collage with like tape and stuff like that. I want to do very, very punk rock things with the story as I go, and as well as tell a story. And then people love Klaus and Eugene. They just love him. I get so many compliments of that character from Breaking Edge. I don't know why. He was kind of just one for me. So I think I may do.
Nice guy.
He is a nice
Seems like he just wants to like
He
help out.
is.
He's just kind of, just gets made fun of, even by dead witches.
So I think I'm gonna do a small spin-off of a couple issues of Granite State Goth and explore my vampire LARP stuff and like
Yes,
do all that. I think that'll be a little fun. Maybe have Patrick draw it, maybe have somebody else draw it, but yeah, I plan on doing this forever. My contract with Scouts a couple more years. They seem to keep wanting them. It seems to be selling well over there. Obviously if you follow me, you can get them way sooner than them because I don't. Next issue for them, the Coven, it's coming out in October, maybe.
That's dude. I'm all aboard, so I cannot wait to see kind of where this goes and where Zeke goes. So if you had to give it like a pitch, what is your like 1 sentence, 2 sentence pitch for Granite State Punk?
If you didn't ask me that and just asked me to pitch it, it's because you said 2 sentences.
Oh, you can make it as long. I was just saying, like, what is your
It could be a really long run-on sentence.
Yeah. Granite State Punk is a story about a recovering alcoholic who's in the punk scene, who's trying to make his way, but he finds out he's connected to a coven of witches, but he wants nothing to do.
It is worth every little bit. And now, do you have? I know we just missed you at MegaCon. Do you have any upcoming conventions that you're doing whether this year or next year planned?
Yeah. So I have instead of Granite State, I normally go to Granite State Con because I think it's a great convention and really good this year. If you guys are Ninja Turtles fans, they're going all out for Ninja Turtles for the 40th anniversary.
40th, yeah. I was gonna say.
I will be in Baltimore because Baltimore is where the indie comics play. Last year was nominated for a Ringo. Hopefully we're up for a Ringo again this year. So we're nominated for a Ringo for the lettering for Granite State Punk because lettering is a super important part of this book. And we were nominated for Ringo for Cthulhu Invades. I do have a book called Cthulhu Invades. Wonderland, Oz, and Neverland. Also, we have 3 big giant graphic novels. Here's one right here for the Oz. They're very, very cool. So I'll be at Baltimore next. And then I got a lot of small Florida cons. So Lauren's close to me, but
I mean, I'm 3 hours away from Baltimore. It's in September. I might have to try to find my way up there to.
Have you ever been to Baltimore?
I have a couple times. Not really gotten to explore too much, but
it's so good.
Yeah, it's a 3 hour, about 2.5, 3 hour, depending on the traffic and day of the week. But I might have to see you up there, man. And one last thing is, where can everybody find your works? Where can they find you and help support the great things that you're doing? Yeah,
so you can buy any of the books from orangeconeproductions.com. You can buy any of that. Like I said, Granite State Punk is in comic stores. So if you want to get issue 1 and 2, go to your local comic store, ask if they have it. And then I have another book called Coins of Judas from Band of Bards that you can also get in comic stores. In fact, the next issue is coming out 7/10. So that's all that. The other place, if you want to just learn about me, more about what I'm doing, travisgibb.substack.com. I share very intimate stuff about comics and about comic creation. People love my Substack because it's not just about selling stuff. I'm very vulnerable, just like I talked about drug and alcohol. I tell stories about how all this stuff came to be and how important the comics industry is to me and how I can't live without it. Like I really believe comics taught me right and wrong. They taught me. I didn't have a religious family per religious, but I learned, my values of, from Spider-Man, what to do and that you're going to make mistakes and it's going to be okay. I learned, my anything patriotic I learned from Captain America, how I treat people, X-Men, maybe quit drinking from Iron Man. I mean, I'm not really good at it.
Us either.
But yeah, so all those things. So I share about that.
Nice. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, and everybody, if you seem to have forgotten show notes, that's right. The easiest place to go. Everything's right down in there. Come to Baltimore, come to any of the Florida cons. Hit up your local comic book shop. If you happen to find Granite State Punk, by all means, tag us, tag Travis. I want to see it. I know every Wednesday, new comic book day. So while you're in there looking for your favorites, dude, just pop over, take a look at what else they have, because there are really great stories that aren't just superheroes. That's one thing we always like to preach. Yes, we love our superheroes, but dude, there are so many good people doing such killer things in comic books. Really great creatives like Travis doing good stuff. And man, make sure you show some love, pick up some things. You never know what your next favorite comic could be, and you might not even expect it. So do that. Everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. Travis, thanks again for hanging out. Can't wait to chat again. Anything that you have, you got a home here, man. I love getting to chat, and then just, it feels good getting to, Lauren doesn't understand half my references or anything like that. So talking to another person who really understands, it's fun and things. I mean,
someone said Wicked in the comic. I didn't know people actually said Wicked till I met Matt.
They do. Believe it or not, they do.
I actually was curious of whether or not Matt was bringing the Wicked up just
Nope.
to impress me?
It's in his vocabulary regularly.
That's my regular vocab. My dad's got a wicked bad accent. I don't, unless I get road rage. My brother has one. My mom doesn't. My sister doesn't. It's just, but like I said, if I get angry, then it tends to come out a little bit. So that's just how that goes.
My New Hampshire accent is only in New Hampshire. You get me there one day and it's back. I bet in Florida way too long, and Florida has no accent.
It's true.
That's why I would say we don't have an accent.
We just hate DeSantis. That's all we do. That's
exactly.
As a state.
Well, man, thank you so much for hanging out, and everybody else. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for all the great creative interviews. Make sure you're checking those out and supporting everybody out there. We'll see you soon. Cheers.
The content you are listening to is part of the Nerd Initiative Podcast Network. For more info about the home of pop culture positivity, check out nerdinitiative.com. The content you are listening to is part of the Nerd Initiative Podcast Network. For more info about the home of pop culture positivity, be sure to check out nerdinitiative.com.